Hello and welcome back to How About That Crypto. Today, you are going to hear about proof of stake versus proof of work. I'm not going to necessarily try to make an argument for either one, but in light of all of this Ethereum merge stuff, and then now Gary Gensler and SEC coming out and saying that proof of stake is could be potentially a security, so there's like potentially more regulatory scrutiny on it. And also there's a lawsuit that's going on, and we're expected to hear from soon on the Library case. Library is a cryptocurrency company, and in one of the rulings, the SEC implies that, or not one of the rulings, but one of like the court documents or enforcement actions or something, there's this saying that basically, in so many words, the Ethereum network is completely within the SEC's jurisdiction, meaning they can regulate the entire network because a large amount of the transactions are coming from the US. So I think it's an interesting thing to talk about. We're going to get into proof of stake, proof of work, what the different types of issues and challenges are. There's centralization, and there is security, and there's barriers to entry, and we'll see what we happen. I don't have like a big script today. I don't have a bunch of articles to share with you. I've been doing a bunch of research, and I'll have some links below that I use for my research, but I'm not necessarily going to share any with you today. Okay, so remember, this is not financial advice. If you use the links below to do your own research, make your own decisions. All right, so let's get into it. So there's a really awesome debate with two very like prominent people in the crypto world. One guy he works on the Ethereum blockchain. He's like one of their lead developers, and the other one is she's constantly Lynn Alden. She's constantly on all kinds of talk shows and stuff. She runs a money management company, and she's like super good with like the history of money and understanding, the concepts of money. And so anyway, let's dive right in. Okay, so first of all, let's start off with what is proof of stake and what is proof of work. All right, so these are the consensus protocols that the crypto runs on. These are the two most popular. There are a few others, and but these are the biggest ones. Proof of work is what Bitcoin runs on, and we just saw the transition of the second largest cryptocurrency, Ethereum, merged to become transition to become proof of stake. Okay, so let's first talk about proof of work. Proof of work is the energy intensive mining concept of that is behind Bitcoin. Like if you've been listening to the news, and you've probably heard that crypto's killing the planet. They're specifically talking about proof of work mining, and that is really only Bitcoin. The second largest cryptocurrency after Bitcoin that does proof of work is Dogecoin, and that's a fraction of their transaction volume. So the energy is being consumed by Bitcoin miners, and that's the part that we're going to see how they're going to regulate. How do you handle this situation where you have these large consumers of energy, etc. So anyway, the way it works is essentially you have two groups of people. You have miners and you have nodes. And so there are people that run nodes and people that run mining machines, and some miners run nodes. So there are two different things you have to understand in both of proof of stake and proof of work. Both have a security layer and a consensus layer, and then different and at different points the transactions are recorded on the publicly distributed ledger. So All right, so check this out. You got Bitcoin miners. They have to buy these machines, and they have to buy power and try and run these machines, run a software that's trying to solve a mathematical puzzle or equation. And every 14 days, the system looks at the difficulty level of those problems and increases it based on the amount of people on the network. So basically the amount of machines and people trying to mine Bitcoin, the more machines go on, the more power it needs. So like this is a problem if you're thinking about reducing energy consumption, because the larger the network grows, the more popular it gets, the more energy it's going to consume. Now, why is this the case? Well, this is a security measure. So, what you don't want to happen is one Bitcoin miner recording transactions that are not legitimate. You can essentially put in a transaction to pay yourself and take money from other people and saying, oh, Robert sent me, all of his Bitcoin, but like, oh, wait a minute, no, I didn't. There's no evidence of that other than your specific transaction that you're recording. So how do we know if the Bitcoin miner is recording proper transactions? Well, we know because there are nodes, and nodes are all over the world, and you can set up and operate a node if you'd like to. Oops. You could set up a node if you'd like to, and you don't win any money. You don't get any money for it. It probably costs you money. You got to buy the hardware, and you got to set it up, and you got to keep it running, and so it's going to consume energy. From what I understand, they're relatively inexpensive, under $2,000. But as far as, and the energy consumption is nothing like what the miners do. So you would do that if you are interested in participating and keeping the network legitimate and honest. So you got the miners, they compete against each other to solve this mathematical equation or this mathematical puzzle. And essentially once they are able to crack this code, then they win the block, the opportunity to record the transactions in the block. And remember, from way back, blockchain technology is a distributed ledger. And so think of a spreadsheet of transactions. So each block can only contain a certain amount of data, and in Bitcoin it's just the transactional data. So it'll say Robert sent money to this person sent money to that person, whatever. And then once that block is full, it gets capped off with a cryptographic key, and another block comes on top of it, and the next miner who wins that block, it keeps going like that. However, before that block can be added to the chain, it has to be validated by these nodes, and the nodes are the ones keeping the miners honest. And if they discover a transaction or an upgrade or something like that that is not legitimate and not a consensus across the nodes, then that miner loses the ability to mine that block, and it goes to another miner. So then that miner ends up, is disincentivized monetarily to be a bad actor. And then attackers to the network who want to try to take over the network, they need to purchase so much energy and so much power in order to beat all of the other miners on the system. And that's called a 51% attack, by taking over just enough of the network where you can be the one that decides what the transactions say. Okay, so you have the miners and the validators. The miners participate in this computational power consumption to solve these problems and win these block rewards. They get transactional data for all the transactions in the block, and then they also get the reward for winning the computational power. That also is part of the security measures. All right, so proof of stake Okay, so just recap. So proof of work, you have miners and validators. Miners have to buy these expensive machines, and they have to pay for security. They have to pay for energy to run those machines. They have to pay for energy to cool those machines, and there's no guarantee that you will get a block. However, the more machines you have, the more likelihood that you win the blocks. The more blocks you win, the more money you make. Now, and then all of those transactions that each of those miners put into the block have to be verified across the distributed ledgers. So think like there's like, hundreds of these spreadsheets, and the validator nodes just check the spreadsheet compared to the transactional data that's in there and say, yep, looks good, yep, looks good, yep, looks good. And if there's a large enough consensus, then it keeps moving forward. However, there's some nuances to that, and I'm not going to get into. So basically, you have miners and validators. Miners they provide security to the network and they record the transactions. Validators make sure that the information that the miners are putting onto the blockchain is legitimate. All right, so now you have proof of stake. Proof of stake is you have to put up your money. So let's think of Ethereum. I have to buy 32 ETH and some software and a hardware, and I have to plug my computer in, and I got to keep it running. And my staked ETH is basically like the collateral. And so I put up this collateral, and if the validator pools are all selected at random. So you don't have to, like, the larger the pool of ETH or money that you put up doesn't necessarily give you an advantage like it does in Bitcoin mining. Like the lot more rigs you have, the more energy you consume, the greater your reward opportunity to win those blocks. But for proof of stake, it's selected at random, so the barriers of entry are pretty low. You can put your money into a pool and with other people you don't know through online protocols that are already designed. Like Lido is something you can just stake your ETH there, and you share the transaction fees with everybody else in that pool. So it's like a percentage return on your money, and it's pretty much guaranteed. Like, unless somebody in that pool is a bad actor, or the people that are running the pool are bad actors. So what happens if you're running a validator node in proof of stake? You put up all your money, and now you're like, great, so now my machine's running. Well, what about the security measures? Well, okay, so the security measures in proof of stake are that your collateral you put up, you'll lose it. So, like with Bitcoin mining, the goal is to prevent bad actors by making this computational power need rise greater and greater and greater the more people are on it. So you would need to like purchase all that power and all those machines in order to try to take over the network in proof of work. But in proof of stake, what they do is they punish bad actors. They don't try to prevent bad actors. So if somebody decides that they're going to pay themselves extra ETH, or censor a transaction, or add a transaction that's not real, and or try to spend their own money multiple times within the block, then when the network identifies that is an illegitimate transaction, then